All right, fellow investors, followers of AE. Look, thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for taking the hour to watch this live presentation, which will be a recorded presentation webinar. The main reason we're doing this, people have been patient over the last 4 months since we provided that banger of a hole in that 2317 that followed other bangers of a holes. But 302 meters at 1.0, no, what was it? What was it, Neil? 302 meters at 1.09% copper equivalent. People have been patient. Our stock has done very well. One of the best performing stocks in the venture. For a reason. But look, everyone's asking, what are we doing? Where are we going to drill? This is one way that we can get all that information out there. We put a lot of work. When I say we, Charlie, Neil, hit their team to understand the geology, and they're going to explain why they spent so much time, what they've learned, where we're going to drill. I want to add one caveat. This is our drill plan as we see the world today. But as you know, things can change. We're going to have some IP that was very successful that we got towards the end of the season. One of the reasons why we drilled 2317. Based on IP, our drill plan might change. And you know what? As you drill, your plan evolves. But as we see the world now, this is how the drill plan is going to be. But look, we can find the source of all these dikes, and all of a sudden our whole plan changes. But as of right now, this is our drill plan. And we're going to come out with a news release after our IP, maybe give an update of what this webinar is and show people what we're going to drill and how the IP may have changed things. But we're very excited for this program, and I'm sure that's all you want to hear from me. So Neil's going to get started. He's going to give a presentation of our drill plan, what they've discovered, etc. And then Charlie's going to come on afterwards and give a little presentation as well. So Neil, Charlie, and everyone else that's following, thank you very much for your time. And on to you, Neil. I'm going to let you share screen right now.
Hey, right on. Yeah, thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to dive right into just a quick few slides, kind of going through the bones of the drill plan, and then we'll spin you around in 3D and show what this phase one is going to look like, and then where we'll potentially be expanding for phase two a bit later in the summer. So yeah, I'll dive right into it here. Okay. Yeah, so this is the exploration plan overview. Our initial phase one is going to focus on connecting the north and the south zone. And this is what we've been communicating for a long time. It was readily apparent at the end of last season that we're seeing a lot of similarities between the zones. And that's just been further reinforced by Charlie and Dave's work in the off season here, going through the old holes, picking out the different intrusive lithologies and really tying together the sedimentary host rocks. And so because we're seeing a lot of these similarities in the diking and the host rocks and the geophysical signature, we have a lot of confidence in doing a more systematic step through this north and south zone. And then further expanding some of the underexplored areas at depth, particularly in the southeast and in the northeast. As well as at surface in the southeast where there's the gold-rich stockwork zone. So there's a lot of ground left to explore here, but we think the best opportunity for adding to both our understanding of what's going on and the tonnage of the potential deposit that's emerging is going to be doing this systematic exploration between the north and the south zones. So I'm just going to transition now. This is a view of the IP signature, the shallow IP signature over the area with the porphyry stock, our main drilling area, and yeah, this IP imagery. What's really interesting is now integrating our latest mag data with our LiDAR DEM. We get a really nice appearance of these northeast or northwest southeast trending structures. And so that's reflected in the orientation of a lot of the diking as well. So, it lends a lot of support to the plan of drilling these roughly east-west oriented holes to try and intersect that predominant fabric as perpendicularly as we can. Yeah, and so diving right into where we see our initial holes going and then stepping to the north. So the plan will be to start in the south In areas where we have a lot more coverage, drill hole coverage, we're going to be doing slightly smaller step outs. So the plan here is to get a bit tighter spacing and really help us properly understand the orientation of the different intrusive phases. So this is along hole 17, hole 11, hole 8 from last year, which were, very, very, oh, go back. Very, very good holes. And then there will also be a focus of stepping to the shallow area in the historical south zone, the near surface gold copper rich area, and doing a few short holes. I mean, that's planned short holes. Last year, that was the plan with hole 8. And we just kept staying in very decent to very good mineralization. But it's very underexplored to the west and actually coming into plane here, to the east and coming into plane to the southeast. So that's going to be a secondary focus of this phase 1 as well. Yeah, and stepping forward, so this is moving at about a halfway point between the north and the south, where we have less drilling control. The step outs are going to be broader, but we still are aiming to hit as much as we can through the shoulder and exploring near surface to the west, where there is absolutely no historical drilling. We have some good indications from hole 12 and hole 17 that, near surface, there's some very strong mineralization. So we want to give ourselves our best chance at hitting near surface mineralization and projecting that down to depth, where we've seen the best mineralization so far in this IP shoulder. And then obviously another hole collaring from the west, from the east to the west, really help tie together that geometry and build tonnage. So yeah, that's the plan in the areas where we don't have drilling. Stepping forward again to the north, this is where we were hole 12, hole 13, hole 4 from 2022. This is where we're seeing the bulk of our bornite mineralization, and we really want to test again further to depth, below where we were hitting, and also to the west of where we were hitting, where we're seeing some good results near surface in the bornite bearing diking specifically, both quite shallow and fairly deep. Stepping further north again, where we have less coverage, we're really interested in stepping it a little bit further to the northeast to depth. So this is MAC 2314, which was also a really solid intercept, and we're seeing quite a bit of the really nice disseminated bornite mineralization. Again, very, very little information at surface to the west, and absolutely no information at depth. So these are kind of broad strokes of what we're aiming to do in our phase 1 program. What I'm going to do now is jump into a 3D view that Nick at our office has put together that's integrating all of the historical data, the drilling data, and the shallow IP. And then we can throw on our sulfide speciation shells and our initial phase 1 plan, and that's going to, it really paints a nice picture. So can everyone see this? Just Charlie, nod if you can see this on your screen.
Indeed, I can.
Perfect. Okay. So, yeah, this is a zoomed out overview, and this is just running in a web browser. There's no special software for this at all. So we can see our shallow IP. We can see all of the historical and the drilling that we have done. And now if we turn this IP off, we put our bad beanstalk footprint on there, we get the more traditional view, I think, of what has been communicated to the market and investors so far. And then we'll just throw the proposed drill holes on there for this phase 1, and it shows the coverage of where we're planning on covering, and you can really see at depth how that fills in a very unexplored area, especially along the west, or viewing to the north out to the west at depth. And what else we can do is show the grade on the historical holes and the holes that we've drilled, and this is going to be available for anyone to view. This will be hosted on our website after a little bit of tweaking. But yeah, it's a very cool visualization tool. One thing we're looking forward to doing with this is when we get the IP data, and the survey's coming along swimmingly right now. So yeah, we expect to get that within the next 2 weeks, and have a refined hole plan. Then we can put this out as well. And throughout the season, we can communicate our results, where we've drilled so far, what results are pending, in a presentation like this that anyone can see, and rather than having a single static 2D image, it really helps put everything into context. 3D is becoming more of an industry standard way of visualizing things. That said, it's not a replacement for good old fashioned cross sections, but it helps show the whole property, maybe a more holistic view of everything, which I really like. Yeah, and so the other thing that we have on here, and this has been floated around over the last month, this is our sulfide speciation. So starting with chalcocite, bornite, and chalcopyrite, and it really shows this hotter, more oxidized part of the system, potentially vectoring into a target maybe a little bit deeper to the northeast where there is no drilling. And that's kind of another justification for drilling those northern step-out holes. But yeah, so this is the plan at a glance. Again, this is subject to change and refinement. If we drill our first few holes and we pipe into the jewel box, as Tony puts it, that's going to dramatically change the plan. But the nice thing about the expanded program and having 2 rigs is we have the flexibility to still continue doing these systematic step outs, but also focusing in on things with another rig. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really agile program this year. But we're still going to try to stick to this more systematic approach now that we have a better understanding of what's going on. And that kind of leads into Charlie. We'll take over here and go into a bit more detail on that understanding, some of the geological insights that they pulled out through a more systematic relog of the core and looking for the different intrusive suites, as well as a little bit of info on some of the geochronology, which is fairly interesting. So Charlie, I'll stop the share here and let you take it.
Great, thanks, Neil. That's excellent. Love that 3D stuff. Let me see how exactly I can get on here. Okay. Okay, so you got that. It's the initial slide that you started with, Neil.
Yeah, that's right.
Just leave that on there for a sec so people can kind of refresh themselves and look at where Tony's jewel box is, which is always fun. Hopefully we get it. And just to give a little quick shout out to a few people here. First of all, you've mentioned David and Nick. David is Dave Hoke. He's a geo that's been on this project for a couple of seasons and does a lot of the legwork and worked a lot with me on the geology here in our office. Neil's based in Vancouver, and he obviously was heavily involved as well. And then Nick Dudek, also in our office, who did a lot of the 3D stuff and has made this 3D thing way more accessible, and it'll be accessible to everybody. I think it's just an awesome thing. And then another person to give a shout out to is Alan Wilson, who helped us with a look at some of the holes on the northern part. Here he's a well-known consultant, excellent porphyry copper gold guy, and kind of pushed us with the sulfide speciation thing too. So shout out to those great people. And then let's move on here. So let me see if this works. Yeah, it seems to be working all right. So just to kind of refresh people, this is a plan view. It shows the Babine porphyry stock that Neil's shown in 2D and 3D. And just to refresh people how we got started on this in 2022 was through Tony's uncle, Gary Artmont. You know, they came up with a plan. They thought they saw on the old data some really deep-seated kind of northerly trending structures, and that's what we targeted that first year with a bunch of deep holes. Drilled on that sort of north-northeast trend. Neil's mentioned that already. There's kind of a mag trend, kind of a chargeability trend there, but there was also in the ZTEM, you know, evidence of some roots to that orientation, and so that's kind of why we drilled most of those holes in that kind of plane, that northerly trending plane, and those holes are shown, you know, with white collar, little circles for the white collars, the 22 holes. So that's initially what got us started, and we got some long intercept of more than decent grade. And what came out of that was, you know, okay, well, you know, that's like, you know, better part of a kilometer, 700-800 meters north-south strike lengths, looking like a significant system. We're seeing similar things from place to place within it. But you know, maybe we need to put some widths to this thing. You know, kind of looks like a northerly trend, so let's test it with some east-west holes, and that's kind of what led to our 2023 program. So focus mainly on that southern area, so that's where we ended up having 3 or 4 holes, maybe 5 that we could put on one section. You know, they're a little offset north to south, so they're not lying exactly on the same plane a section, but more or less. And that's kind of where we've focused much of our efforts in terms of trying to put a geological story together. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. You know, revisiting the geology. What are the controls on mineralization? You know, and maybe can we use an understanding that we develop from that to, you know, to guide us in exploration for this year? And obviously, we did show that the NAC system has some width there. We also showed it has some width farther to the north, where, you know, we had some great intercepts in 12 and some pretty good supportive intercepts in holes 13 and 14. So saw a lot of the same things from north to south. Got some even better intercepts in 2023 with the, you know, the focus on going across what we've so far interpreted as a sort of more northerly trending system. So, you know, looking at the geology, don't worry about all the words. You can get this and relook at it, but this is a cross section in that southern part, you know, through hole 17 with the big boomer intercept, and I'll show those coming up here shortly. With hole 1, 8, 11, and 17, and kind of a simplified schematic showing the Babine porphyry stock in pink on the right, and a sedimentary sequence that we could show that was generally easterly dipping through those holes, and then a bunch of dikes, some dikes, and it's very simplified there. And what we've worked on this winter is to show that there's a lot more dikes, and they're very important, and we've got a bit better understanding of all the geology. So, as I say in the words there, don't worry about it. We'll show you that. So we're going to start by showing some of those intercepts, and kind of this is where it happened. The visual of me and all the visitors here is kind of blocking that out on my screen anyway, but you can see at the top of holes 1, and it was the same as hole 2 on hole 2 and 8. You know, very good south zone, gold rich near surface there. So really important thing I'm going to chase up, but also, you know, value is going all the way down in hole 1 from 2022, and some pretty darn nice stuff, very deep. So pretty exciting in that one. And then we go with 8, and I think, you know, one of the things you want to take away from just looking at these intercepts, and these are just things that are pulled from, you know, from our news releases as these holes came out, but there's a line down that dike, and I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but that's the 0.2, and you know, this is very good continuous mineralization. It's quite spiky with some great grades, which obviously, you know, make the hay, especially up at the top there, but all the way down, and it's greater than 0.2 cutoff. So you know, gets down really deep. I don't know what it is north to south, or surface to depth there, but we're looking at you know, many hundreds of meters. So greater than 0.2. So we just keep going with that. Hole 11, same thing. There's that 0.2 cutoff. Beautiful grade in the middle there. And then later on in the season, right at the end, the last hole 17, plugged it down, then we got that really good boomer. And I think one other thing you want to remember about this hole is it kind of cuts obliquely across that section. It isn't right on section, so there's a bit of north-south width to this section with really good grade. So that's pretty exciting, and that's where we have a good part of our understanding. We're going to drill a couple more holes on this section to try and really nail, what are the orientations of the different geologic elements that control where the mineralization is. So, and when we understand the orientation of those things, then we can better target them as we move to the north. So we'll discuss what those different elements are here coming up. So this is our original schematic sort of a section. And then, based on what we did through the winter, David and myself and others, it looks way more complicated. So this is basically the same section, the pale pink granodiorite stock on the right, and a whole bunch of pickup sticks of different colors there. And, as I've outlined and highlighted in the text there, the dikes are critical. There's a lot of different lithologies there. It's nothing to worry about. We'll probably lump those into, dikes that are somewhat similar compositions. But, when you're first trying to pull it apart, you want to recognize all the different lithologies in terms of texture, etc. And then we can lump them back together. But one of the most important things to note is that they all are associated with grade. When you get a dike of a certain composition isolated, cutting through a drill hole, you look at it, okay, does that dike carry grade within the bounds of the dike? In almost every case, we can say yes. And, marginal to it, does it bring in grade into the wall rocks? Yes, that's another important thing. So we're going to talk about both the dikes and the wall rocks as we go forward. But in the end, what it turns out, at least in my mind, the way we've interpreted it now is, and I think it's pretty solid, is that where you have the most dikes is where you get the most grade. And the rocks that actually have the best grade are the host rocks, which have been around the longest. And that kind of makes sense. Okay, they're there. They get altered and mineralized with the first dike phase. Another dike phase comes in and it alters and mineralizes both that earlier dike phase and the wall rocks. And this just kind of continues through time. And we'll give it a little bit of a time element in a minute. But more dikes, the better. And, the more permissive host rocks, the better too. And you'll find out that pale yellow unit, that conglomerate with some sandstone, and a little bit above and a little bit below that, that's where, so far, it seems like the best grade lies. So where you have the most dikes and the most permissive host rocks is where you got the most goodies. Not really all that complicated, it seems. So just a quick look at what these things look like. This is a lower fine grain sedimentary package with concretions, etc., identifying that it's a sedimentary package, very fine grained, commonly very dark colored, like in this upper image. That's the biotite and magnetite related to the alteration. And interestingly enough, you don't really see that alteration strong over in the granodiorite porphyry stock. Even though you do get a bit of grade over there, it doesn't have as intense alteration as the sedimentary rocks do. Often, or once in a while, it's quite bleached, and that's kind of an albitic overprint. So some different styles of alteration. In the middle, you get a bit more sandstone, a very obscure unit. You can see in the upper image, and these are images of the same piece of core with staining, which identifies in the bright yellow potassium feldspar. A lot of that is alteration. So very high temperature alteration. You're near something that cooks things up, and a lot of biotite and magnetite. That's why the rocks are black. And that's an important thing with this kind of early alteration, because these are very iron-rich minerals. And when you bring in some hydrothermal solutions that are carrying copper and gold, those hydrothermal solutions likes to sulfidize the iron-rich minerals. So it's very important to have that early iron-rich biotite and magnetite alteration, gets more readily sulfidized, and you can drop out the sulfides such as chalcopyrite, bornite, chalcocite, etc. So looking at the next unit up, this is the conglomerate that I said is so well mineralized. Maybe it's a permeability issue when the hydrothermal solutions and the alteration, or maybe somewhat earlier alteration comes in, but maybe they can access this conglomerate and sulfidize it, partly because it's permeable, but also because this conglomerate has a lot of class. These individual rounded things are class, we call them, in a sedimentary rock, just like pebbles and cobbles that you might see in a stream. Maybe not, it's not stream deposited, maybe it's, you know, a lake or perhaps a marine kind of thing, but there's a lot of cobbles with iron-rich minerals in them, you know, biotite or hornblende originally, and those things can be altered fairly easily. So it seems to be a very good host rock, and it's also quite potassically altered. So again, high temperature alteration with the biotite, magnetite, potassium feldspar. That's the potassic alteration common to many porphyry copper systems. So really nice looking alteration there. Another view or two of this, and occasionally you got these beautiful veins that Neil has posted so many nice photos of on our website. There's a core box with all the conglomerate. You can see there all the cobbles and pebbles in it, but lots of pore space, quite dark in general, and the darker stuff generally does seem to run a bit better. And sometimes, like in this, you know, the phenocrysts in the original cobble are really sulfidized. So this is just loaded with chalcopyrite in there. And in other instances, you know, this very dark conglomerate has more sulfide in the matrix to the conglomerate as opposed to the class. But you also get the odd vein, not tons of veins, but lots of disseminated sulfides in that. It's very nice host rock. Another very interesting and probably, I think, a very significant thing that we just outlined in the work this winter is in the southern section. You see a very geochemically distinct and very obscure looking lithology that is a fine-grained diorite or Monza diorite. So it might be a diorite with you know, a fair amount of potassium feldspar, maybe in the primary or original assemblage when it came in. And it's a sill-like body, and a sill is a type of intrusion that is generally emplaced at quite high levels because it doesn't shoot up through like the dikes do, but it goes parallel to the bedding or stratigraphy, more or less. You know, it's kind of a flat lying thing in this instance, because you see it in these holes, and you see it in the two holes number 2310 and 2316 to the north. So we know it's real. It has a very low thorium and really stands out in the geochemistry nicely and can be tracked from hole to hole. And it is mineralized. And I think it's a fairly early phase, predates a lot of the dikes. And I think it brought in a lot of that really dark colored biotite, magnetite, K-spar alteration. So high temperature alteration seems to be associated with this and with some of the higher thorium, similar composition dikes, but just geochemically distinct dikes. So I think that's what brought that original alteration into this stratigraphy, and that key of the right kind of stratigraphy, this really dark colored biotite, magnetite rich and K-spar rich alteration. And then the dikes, you know, seem to be what controls the mineralization. So there's some of the dikes that are just post-date this thing that are similar composition, higher thorium, but also mineralizers. And then you have other phases of dikes coming in, and you're ready to go. So, you know, that takes us back to what is the age of this stuff? And one of the key things here, I think, is that this is a young system, and it's not just the fact that it's tertiary in age. That's long been known in you know, in the Babine area. We've known this is an Eocene system from Grand Isle and Morrison and you know, and all the other occurrences in the Babine belt, and it's the same here. The one difference here is that, you know, our recent age dating of the stratigraphy and the intrusions show that the host rocks aren't that much older than the actual intrusions in the mineralizing system. So this is you know, complicated looking diagram. Don't worry about the details. Lots of age dates there, but the key with this in this case is you know, we've dated some of the detrital zircon. So these are little grains of zircon which are very resistant, that get preserved in a sedimentary environment, and they're derived from igneous rocks that are deposited in these sedimentary beds. And you analyze those with a mass spectrometer and get individual ages from them by zapping them with a laser. So we collected some of these sedimentary rocks from, in this case, hole 17. And there you go. These are the plots, and it shows you a range of ages of the individual grains. So we plot up these histograms, and you look for the youngest ages, and you know that that is you know, what we call a minimum depositional age. So you know that the youngest grains in there are about 62. So you know the sedimentary rocks are at least that young, and they could be a little bit younger. And remember, in Eocene age, quite young, Eocene age for the Babine mineralizing systems is about 52. So these host rocks could be just a little bit older, maybe as much as 10 million years, but probably actually very close in age to the intrusions themselves. And I'll show you why we say that. So the sedimentary rocks, you know, look quite young. You know, here's some ages that we have from the host rocks, and they're all are from the dikes. I'm sorry, they're all about 52. Whether they're dikes or the Babine stock itself, they all come out at about 52. Different kinds of dikes, even these late dikes that this crazy Charlie guy is called copper dikes, because they're loaded with copper, and they seem to be the latest thing. They even cut the Babine stock, and so that latest phase is still bringing in some goodies, and they're still about 52. And then one other thing that we dated was actually a tophaceous rock from within the stratigraphy, and I've kind of schematically shown that on there, that gray band, but it's a volcanic, so an eruptive a lithology of eruptive origin, so it was blown out of a volcano, you know, and so that actually gives another 52 or, you know, roughly 50, 51, 52 million year age. So we know those host rocks are pretty much the same age as the intrusions. You know, obviously they've got to be there before the intrusions come in, but they're within error in this 51, 52 age range. So, you know, that is pretty significant in that, you know, maybe these rocks are pretty, you know, they haven't been rocks for very long. They might almost not be rocks in a sense that they might not be completely cemented. And I think that allows a lot of fluid movement in the hosts. There's some connate water there that gets moved around with the hydrothermal solutions, and that's possibly why this is such a well mineralized and large system. So the age dating kind of helps the whole thing go on. We haven't dated this earlier diorite thing, but we intend to do that. That might be just a little bit older. It's farther down in the stratigraphy, but remember, I think that's the thing that brought the alteration in. And, you know, the reason that these things can be so well altered, or a possible reason or something that can help that process, is the fact that they're not too much older. There might be a bunch of connate water. These high temperature intrusions come in. They start this hydrothermal cell moving around. They alter it nicely, and then you continue to have intrusions coming into the sequence, and that, you know, just mineralizes everything better and better as things go on. So, you know, this nicely defined sedimentary basin with all these intrusions coming in, not long after you've had deposition, and you've got a nice system developed. And then back to this, you know, how do we relate all this stuff about the rocks to, you know, to the overall picture and where we're going to go and how we're going to explore this? as Neil mentioned, there's kind of a nice sort of northwest trend. This was originally recognized by Gary Artmont and his his brilliant geological mind. He's unfortunately no longer with us, but he'd like this, I think. That northwest trend mirrored by a similar and subtle IP trend, which I'll show in the next slide. But we think that follows the trends of the dikes, and that alteration that was brought in by the earlier, more mafic phases. So important to see that, and that kind of pushes our plan. So there's that more subtle IP signature in behind, and that parallels the mag, and that's the trend we've been pushing, and we're going to use our understanding of the system to focus initially on the area in here, the phase 1, and then we believe we can push it out. We see the same rocks up in the northern part of the section. I think you could see in one of the images Neil showed that there's quite a bit of copper and gold, in some of the historical holes. I was going to say prehistoric, not that old, but in those historical holes down this way. So we're really excited about this area in the south and testing that as we move forward. And that's it. Hopefully I haven't gone over time. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Charlie. You can unshare your screen now if you want. So, look, I want to thank everyone for joining. We have a little time now. If people have some Q&A, I know some questions were sent in, but I know one individual that's on the call who's a big fan, who will have quite a few questions. So, Nate, go ahead and ask a few questions. I know you got them.
Yeah, hi, I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted.
Okay, thanks, guys. Yeah, great overview. Thank you for the update there on the geochronology work there, Charlie. That's awesome. It does lend to this understanding that it is a young system and the level of mineralization that's coming in. I'm very interested. I think my first question would be: we've identified this hornblende sill that you mentioned in the southwest zone, and has it been seen further north? If it's been such a contributor to some of the preconditioning that you spoke of, or is it just localized in the southwest zone at this time?
It has actually been recognized. It's definitely in holes 10 and 16, which are just a little bit north of 17, 11, 8, and 1 on that southernmost section. So that's why I'm pretty confident, that it is a sill-like body. It just seems to dip in the same way, same direction as it does on the south. And then right at the very bottom of a couple of the holes, I think it's 12 and 13, you get a hint of it, like kind of right at the end of the hole. So of something similar there. And you just don't see that same geochemical signature with that rocks of that texture, anywhere else. It does seem like that kind of a body. So maybe it's dipping. I don't know if it's continuous all the way up there, but certainly, what we see in the alteration with the biotite, magnetite, and potassium feldspar is similar, in all the holes from south to north. So I suspect there might be something like that in there as well. I don't know for sure that's what does it, but it sure seems to have a close association. And and that same type of alteration does not affect the biotite granodiorite. So that granodiorite came in there, during that sequence of diking. It's really only cut by a couple of types of dikes. So it's sort of late in the sequence, still bringing in a little bit of mineralization itself. But I suspect that there's something, like these fine-grained diorites somewhere. I don't know where the center of that is. Maybe that has something to do with the Tony's jewel box, copper jewel box. Maybe it's a copper gold jewel box. That would be nice. Yeah.
Stop talking about my jewel box, Charlie.
Okay, and then a couple questions I have here to Neil, maybe with the 3D model up. We've had some discussions around here with some other individuals interested in the project, and one of the items that was flagged was some concerns around the idea that potentially hole 5 in the north and hole 15 in the south could be potentially bookends and could have shut off maybe some exploration potential to the north and the south. Can you maybe comment? I mean, you're showing now in the 2024 program potentially going beyond those areas or further into those areas. Could you explain why it is you would like to see us go into that area some more?
Yeah, so I'll start with hole 15 in the south. Hole 15 in the south is on the far south, southwest corner of the geophysical anomaly, and extending down further southeast from the main Babian Porphyry stone. And it was predominantly within the higher chargeability zone, that phyllic halo. And so, yeah, it was less mineralized overall. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everywhere to the south is closed off. As you know, the geophysical signature does wrap around to the southeast. And so that's where we would focus the exploration, is stepping sequentially southeast from that near surface stockwork zone and seeing how that projects to depth in the southeast, because there's very, very sparse drilling in there. And a lot of it ended quite shallow. We don't have really accurate historical logs, and we know that there is a single phase of post-mineral diking, specifically in that south zone. It's not very thick, but it can result in completely depleted grades. There's just, you know, it postdates the mineralization, so it's not mineralized. And so that's a potential for explaining why some of the bottom holes in and around that south zone are completely barren. We just don't know. And when I say completely barren, I mean like the bottom 10 meters, they ended mineralization and they stopped drilling. We have a lot of indication that if you push a little bit deeper, particularly in hole 8, 10, hole 17, hole 4, you get right back into some very, very good mineralization. So yeah, we're pretty optimistic that doing some systematic testing southeast and similar northing as hole 15, but moving towards the east, that, you know, we'll see quite a bit more joy in those holes. Going to the north in hole 5, I mean, hole 5 wasn't spectacularly mineralized, but it was still very anomalous in copper from top to bottom. There were veins in it. There's still the odd vein of bornite within it. We're seeing maybe a bit more muted alteration, but it's still there. And so there's a number of possibilities why that might be. A lot of the historical holes at slightly shallower depths further to the north were hitting much stronger grades than we did in hole 5. So we know that the grade does increase again a bit further to the north. But we have a lot of really good indication, particularly from hole 14 and hole 12, that the best grade might actually track a little bit closer to the porphyry stock there. And so the targeting in that zone specifically is going to be really aided by the IP, I think, because that area is kind of outside of where we were seeing the best deep resolution on the 3-line reconnaissance survey from last season. So when we have the bigger, deeper seeing data set, we'll see how that tracks in the north, specifically with that IP shoulder. Regardless, it's still like, you know, it's not, IP is not a fine targeting method. It helps us plan the broad locations, but we have a lot of good indications from sulfide speciation and from just proximity in space to known zones of good mineralization in hole 14 and hole 12. That stepping a little bit maybe to the northeast of hole 5 is gonna yield some really good results. So that's gonna be tested this season. And then quite possibly, depending on what the IP brings out, testing a bit further to the north still, and potentially a bit further to the west. We know we've got some zones that are, you know, have a bit of a muted copper signature, but are flanked by really, really high grade zones, and that could be exactly what's happening in hole 5. And similar to hole 3, you know, hole 3 is potentially a little bit too close to the porphyry stock. Similar to what we drilled in hole 7 or hole 6, but we know stepping to the west yielded some very, very good results where potentially there's a higher density of these dikes, which Charlie has shown us. So important to the mineralization as well. So there's a lot of factors that could explain why we're not seeing the booming grades in those holes. But the fact that we're seeing still really, really strongly anomalous grades, I think is a very good sign. And so that tells us we should be continuing to explore those areas.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that update. Okay, I'm gonna let go for a second here. I'll come back if I have some more questions.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions here. So from Brian, how much of the old core has been tested for thorium?
So we don't have the complete geochemical data set from the historical core, and B, it was analyzed using aqua regia, which is common if you're looking for gold and copper in sulfides. But it doesn't get you a complete digestion, or as complete a digestion as 4-acid, which was used on the more modern data. So we don't have any thorium or any reliable thorium data from the historical core. But all of the stuff we analyzed in 2022 and 2023 has that full geochemical suite 4-acid data on it. And that's what we're using to assist in building that model of the diking.
Thanks, Neil. From Piet, how do you integrate, and Nate kind of touched on this, how do you integrate the lesser hits in holes 2203 and 2205 in your model and understanding?
Yeah, so I saw that question pop up on the bottom. That's kind of why I brought hole 3 into that explanation with Nate's question. So yeah, just think we touched on that pretty well, responding to Nate there. There's a number of things going on that are responsible for the mineralization, as our current understanding holds. So yeah, it could be a function of a number of things: proximity to porphyry stock, proximity to the diking. If it's really sparse in diking, and then the rock hasn't been prepped as well to accept that mineralization. A lot of those sulfide-bearing fluids might not actually deposit their sulfides, precipitate out their sulfides in that body of rock, and it might go to a more amenable host. But we know those hosts can be very, very close by because it's a function of proximity to the dikes. So yeah, the fact that we see the strongly anomalous copper grades, I think, is very, very good in those holes. If hole 3 was just the first blind hole drilled on that property, you would be very, very excited. And that's probably our least exciting hole. So yeah, that's why we're going to continue exploring those areas with some moderate step outs. But yeah, it by no means writes that area off. If anything, it just shows how big and robust the system is, with just how broad the copper anomaly is.
Yeah, I think the other thing, if I can chime in, is you look even at the good holes, and the grade is spiky down hole. I mean, it's obviously got that very nice floor down on the south of 0.2, kind of a cutoff type grade. But even the sort of, if you want to call them duster holes that we drilled, none of them are dusters. I mean, they really have pretty good grade, continuous all the way down, in terms of, Neil calls it anomalous, but I think I'd call it even better than anomalous. When you look at what's being mined, and some of the other porphyry deposits in BC, it's kind of like 0.1, and so you have this very large system, copper gold system, and some parts of it are very, very good, and other parts of it are not as good, but still, when you put them all together, it makes for a very, very large potential deposit. So I think that's a good way of looking at it.
A couple of those figures were using the old, I noticed that was the old geochem plot. So any of the area that's blue in those figures is below 0.2. But it's very rare, even in hole 8, that we do see grade below that 0.2, and almost all of it is above 0.1. It's only when you see that blue color at the very bottom, when we get into the pyrite, the finer siltstone, that it completely drops out. But most of hole 3 and hole 5 was all above 0.1, and they averaged above 0.2 over the entire hole. So.
Hey, sorry, Nate jumping in here. I'm seeing a couple questions at the bottom too related, but Neil, I was going to ask, can you bring up the speciation model when you go to answer maybe these last couple questions? I just also wanted to expand on it as well. Can we talk about, Tom's got it there as well, the phase 2 plan, where it was talking about, expanding to the north, can we focus on talking about what's going on in the southwest to southeast, and as well as that high grade gold zone in the southwest?
Yeah, there's more work to do there. We want to get some boots on the ground. There's some historical outcrop map there, and what we know is happening around NAC 2309. We hit really nice mineralization at surface. Lots of molybdenite dusting. There's malachite in the upper 50 meters or so, more oxidized rock near surface, like the more weathered rock. And so any outcrop in that area should be a very good hint as to what's going on. And so we just need to get some eyes out there, as well as coupling that with the IP data, which we don't have very good coverage of right now, but that's ongoing. And so rather than putting any holes we put in there right now would be very subject to change. But if you can see my screen, this whole area is open to systematic exploration once we have a better handle on how we're going to properly orient those holes. And right now that could be, do we collar a bit further to the south and still drill towards the porphyry stock, or do we collar a bit further to the north? I suspect ideally what we'll do is try to have it similar to what we've got proposed in between the north and the south zones right now. There's a lot of real estate here near surface that needs to be tested. But how that mineralization tracks to depth is going to be important to know as well. And I think we'll get a better info on that from the IP survey. But yeah, this is a very compelling area. But right now we don't want to, we have a tiger by the tail, so to speak, along this western zone that could be, something potentially economic in and of itself. This is icing on the cake right now, but it is still, it's a little bit riskier, right? It's underexplored. It could work out very, very, very well, but we just want to test it a bit more systematically and rigorously. You don't want to just pop a hole into the middle of it without all the information, because if you miss on that hole, it could kill some of the excitement. Whereas it could be a similar situation as to hole 5 and hole 3. I suspect we will still hit some very anomalous grades, but we want to make sure we have the best chance to hit good grades and justify further exploration of that area.
That's great. And so what I'm hearing is, you're waiting for some more data. You're looking at possibly working your way from the southwest to the southeast. Can you go back to a plan map and then just, I don't know if you can take a screenshot and throw it in paint, but then just doodle where the IP lines are running from to? My understanding is you have the 3 already. I don't know if you can doodle all of it on there, but from the southwest, from the southwest to the southeast, where do those lines look like they start right now? And where do they stretch from 2023? And then where are you guys infilling, and where are you expanding those lines?
In that, sorry, are you for the IP or for the?
Yes, yeah, for the IP lines, just so we can understand like why it is that you maybe don't feel as confident right now throwing a hole at that, and where the lines being run this year are going to help add to that confidence to go forward with it.
Well, he's saying he's not feeling confident now, like as confident. Like, we've got a tiger by the tail right now in this main area of interest.
It's
like in 2 weeks' time, a lot of this thing's going to change.
Yeah, we're very confident that there is something to be found along the southeast, but any holes we put in there right now would definitely be subject to change, because a lot of that is going to be informed by the IP. I also want to stress that it is a big step up. This is a 500-meter grid, and we're talking about a 700-meter distance in completely undrilled ground between hole 9 and the south zone. And so we want to cover that as best we can. We know there's not a ton of outcrop, but any outcrop that we do find in there, and any float as well, potentially, could give us a really good indication that we're on the right track. One indication here is that there is a very good soil anomaly, but we do know there is a north-south transport direction. So, but yeah, getting back to the IP, basically the historical IP covered diagonally roughly an area like this. So we had 3 lines, a line down the center, and then 250 meters spacing on either side to cover the main zone. The rest of the survey is going to cover the entire rest of the porphyry stock to the north and to the south. And that's going to give us a lot more confidence on the geometry of that shoulder chargeability signature. And potentially, you know, the implications for the verticality of the porphyry stock. You know, we think it's roughly vertically in place. We have really good indication that it is along the south and along the west. But we don't really know what's going on in the north. There's very, very, very little deep drilling, and there's very drilling that transect from outside the porphyry stock to inside the porphyry stock. So the IP can help with that too. So there's a lot of good data that's going to be gleaned from that, and that's why we're holding off firmly penciling in those plans until we understand exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, sorry.
I think you also have to think about the IP and how you acquire the data and what the chargeability, or what the understanding of the chargeability is previously. Maybe you could just throw that plan view of the IP on there, Neil. I think we had it right in this
okay. Sorry, I can.
Yeah,
I
you can do it in the 3D thing. Yeah, put it on there.
That was right. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see that ring, and even, you know, it's kind of muted there, but it's actually very strong chargeability out in the west and southwest and south. And those are northeast, southwest oriented lines. So on the southern part there, you know, it's kind of hard to really model things when you have such a high influence of that ring around there. And remember,
Yes.
we do have a chargeability high running north, northwest, south, southeast through you know, the area that we focused on so far. But it's hard to visualize that with that really big enhanced chargeability outward from that. And, you know, it's going to be even more difficult in the south really to rely on that as well, because you kind of got a signature in that chargeability ring that's somewhat parallel to your line orientation. But, you know,
Certainly what we have right now,
hopefully it
yeah.
works. Yeah, but you know, it's not a silver bullet, and that's why Neil's outlined that, you know, we want to look at the soil geochem. Maybe we do a little bit more soil geochem. We can XRF those soils and get copper response that way. You know, and then a little bit of boots on the ground. Maybe we are able to see in the limited outcrop, you know, the orientations of some dikes down there that are parallel to the system farther west or something. I mean, that's kind of why this zone has always been targeted by everybody. This you know, there's some relief in both the mag data and the chargeability data that suggests something that might be coming through there that's on a similar orientation to what we're targeting out to the west. So just want to try and detail that as best we can, and then, you know, hammer it with the drill hole or two.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating this work to produce this speciation model and the model in general for all the other items. I think so. We touched on a little bit on the idea of walking out to the southeast. Something that really jumps out at you, though, if you go back to that plan view, is I think it's a historical hole up in the southeast as well. Was that 95-35?
95-35, yeah. Very interesting. There's there's some pretty strongly anomalous copper in that hole. And there's anomalous copper in these holes as well. A lot of the info we have here, it's not analyzed. We have no information for it. So there is still a lot of smoke around this as well. That's encouraging. Again, you know, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to extend out that way, but we have a lot of good indications. And so, yeah, I think, you know, we stick with the Western zone right now, which has given us a lot of really good results and got a lot of interest from, you know, the right people looking at this. And we develop that, and everything else we continue to explore and apply our understanding to for stepping out further, just lends more opportunity for discovery and expansion. So we're really fortunate to have what we have right now on this property and the blue sky potential.
Yeah. And sorry, on the Monday spaces there, we talked about potentially seeing some access opened up with some of the logging activities. Can you kind of just do a hand wave of the areas that are anticipated, or at least we're hopeful that they'll do some logging, or that we actually have firm understanding that they will be doing some logging? Is that something you guys can speak to right now, or is that still too early?
Tony, can we speak to that right now?
Yeah, like we can't like confirm anything, but like if you can show where the cut block we expect to be.
Yeah, so I'll go back to that little annotate, and this isn't firm. We've received some pretty strong indications of in the affirmative by the loggers in the area that starting in December, the blocks that are laid out on this property will be cut, will be harvested. There's roughly a block planned for here, a little bit in the northeast. And then what we're really excited about is there's a cut block plan to basically do this around the center of the property. Right now, this is all logged, this whole area in here, with a little strip for a creek in the middle that is not logged. But right now, this has provided very, very good access. This is going to dramatically increase our access to the property. And for 2025, I mean, very minimal impact from our activities to really properly punch very short little exploration trails off the edge of these planned cut blocks, and really do proper justice on exploring these really underexplored areas, these unexplored areas. So yeah, I would hate to jinx it, but yeah, this is something that we're really looking forward to.
What people have to understand, it's like it's not the cut block, it's not the reason why you're drilling there, but it's the road that brings you to the cut block that we don't have to pay for. And then the splinter roads off that allow us to give access. So if that cut block gets cut, what you can essentially think about, instead of doing heli rig, which costs between $75,000 and $150,000 a hole, because we get that cut, that essentially allows you to drill 0.5 of a hole extra for every hole you heli rig. So, by saving $125,000 a hole, and the average hole is 250K, instead of drilling 10 heli rig holes, now you can drill 15 just regular skid rig holes. So it's a big game changer.
Yeah, and it really minimizes the environmental impact of our activities, even though mineral exploration is, especially in this area where the rocks, there isn't deleterious elements in what we're pulling out. It's still something to be conscious of, right? I think anytime you fall trees or punch a trail in, that's stuff that needs to be reclaimed. And with the cut blocks and the way that's handled, our activities will involve taking down almost no trees, which is great. That's the main concern we have right now is timber removal, because we're not a timber company, we're an exploration company. So if the loggers come in and do that for us, that really helps us out.
Right on.
So we got a couple more questions here. I think we kind of answered what the significance of the age of the rocks is. Didn't we do that, Charlie?
Yeah, I think so. I think it just, when you've got, it's unusual. And as Alan Wilson said, this is an atypical system for even the Babine Belt, which, most of the mineralization on the other known, mine deposits to the south, are so closely associated with biotite, feldspar, porphyry. Well, we've got those there, but this thing has other rocks that are quite different. The copper dikes are more hornblende bearing things, and then you have those fine grain hornblende bearing diorites and monzodiorites, the sill and the associated dikes. So. And they're all very young, and they're placed into young host rocks, whereas I think the understanding from elsewhere in the district is that the host rocks are a little bit older and maybe not as conducive to soaking up that alteration and mineralization. And maybe that's why, this thing seems kind of special, atypical. Might be related to that slight difference in age in the host and intrusive rocks that are associated with min.
All the great deposits in the world have one thing in common. They're atypical, right, Charlie?
You bet. Yeah, these things are interesting. Not always easy to figure out, but hey, it's fun. It's challenging, and you know, it's great. And so far, it's working out. And let's keep it rolling.
Okay, two more questions here. Okay, I got one from Gord. Long time no see, Gord. Will extra drills be brought in this year? We're bringing two rigs in this year. That's what we're budgeted for. It's we got funding for, so we're gonna stick with the two rigs. Look, we did, I think, what, Neil, like 13,500 meters with one rig over the last 2 years. So we're easily going to surpass that within one season. So we're going to get a lot more information. And I've said this over and over and over again. The best pathfinder for copper and gold is copper and gold. And this is the first time that Charlie got a real budget to do Charlie and Neil work and spend time and understand the geology. And look, you hit these holes that we hit based on the limited information, like, you gotta expect we're gonna hit some more with the brain power of Charlie and Neil and all the information that we now finally have. So we're very excited about it. And I got another question from Grunga. Okay, so I'm gonna read this. How does the South Gold Zone quartz stock work relate to the rest of the system? Is it distinct? Anything that you see in the geochronology or other features that support any theories at this time? Neil or Charlie, you can take this.
You know, it is distinct. I mean, it's I'd heard about the South Gold Zone, and you know, and then you know, thought it was just, you know, somewhat similar to the other stuff, but you know, it really is a quartz vein stockwork, and we don't really see that anywhere else. So exactly what that's related to is kind of hard for me to answer right now. You know, it's sort of one of the shallower, better zones. Number one, the overburden is a little bit less there in the holes than elsewhere, but the other side of it is it's kind of in that zone where the rocks are quite broken up near surface. So, you know, up hole from about 100 meters. It goes a little deeper than that for sure, down to 150, I think. But generally, the rocks you're looking at least after they've been sampled, and I haven't really seen too much, you know, as whole core. They're very broken up, so it's kind of hard to get a really good handle on what the host rocks are, you know, in that part of the system. So I think our understanding's not super great, and we don't really necessarily have the timing of that all worked out. But a very interesting thing to pursue, and exactly how it's related to the other stuff, I'm not sure. It has initially, I thought it was just a quartz chalcopyrite stockwork, but looking at hole one again, you know, just a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to take a quick look and actually saw bornite in the veins, but not in the same way of those really big, beautiful, semi-massive bornite veins that Neil posts lots of pictures of. You know, there's just specks of bornite.
I don't pose. I just give them to Tony.
Okay, well, Tony, okay, it's Tony's fault. Yeah, everything's Tony's fault in this thing. Anyway, you know, there's not a lot of bornite, but it's there. And sometimes it was more commonly bornite than chalcopyrite in those quartz veins in the stockwork. So it has some similarities in terms of mineralogy, but that seems to carry the gold, and you don't necessarily see a ton of sulfide. At least I didn't, and kind of was like, wow, how come this is running so consistently high in gold, you know, without that much sulfide? So it's got differences. And again, maybe this is just part and parcel of this atypical system that shows variation from place to place. And, you know, we gotta keep after that.
So speaking of the Stockworks, I got a text message, not to name names, or to name drop, but like probably one of the biggest gold investors in the business. He was asking about that copper stockwork, and he started. And I'm reading the text message right now. He was digging into the whole old historical data. I don't think they had a plan back then, and they didn't have the information. Well, you got to realize they didn't have internet back then. There's no cell phones. John Daly just won the British Open. Forrest Gump won the Oscars. Bill Clinton was in his first term, so it was a long time ago. But like some of these holes that they hit in the gold copper stockworks, 95, 50, 168.5 meters of 0.81% copper equivalent from surface. 9655, 70.4 of 1.07% copper equivalent. And it's just amazing results, but people are just kind of going all over the place. Copper is at 60 cents a pound. They're looking for something at surface, and it just didn't work. But you do those holes now, and this stock is essentially a rocket ship. So we're just lucky they didn't drill some of the holes near 2317. And Neil, we just talked about this the other day. If you look at the satellite imagery, they actually had collar locations where they're going to drill, where we drilled 2317.
Oh,
By the luck of God, they never drilled there.
50 meters to the north of 2317. There's a drill clearing, but there was never a collar put there. So it was, you know, it was. I'm sure it was in the works, but I think they're working their way from the north to the south. I'm not sure why it never got explored, but that whole area was completely devoid of any historical collars, and that's where we've hit the best results on the property. So yeah, it's
I think, you
fun to
know,
think about.
there's another thing about this, and it's kind of the philosophy of exploration in days like we're living today. The market's pretty tough. You know, stick a little closer to the goodies. I mean, it would be great if we could step way out, and, you know, we're driven by our friend Nate. He loves to, you know, like, he'd want to go out and we'll test way far to the east and way up to the north and stuff. And that's great, except for if you don't hit, right? If you knew you were going to hit up there, that's great. But, you know, we have something really good in that South Gold Zone. Yeah, let's maybe track it out, and, you know, don't take massive step outs. Obviously, the majors would love us to do that, right? But we're a junior, and we're living in a tough market, and we want to stick and outline something that's continuous and ultimately will prove valuable. But we don't want to be drilling dusters just by, you know, taking huge step outs, you know, with our fingers crossed. So stick to that good stuff down there, and maybe close by we're going to see something even better. I mean, it looks like it's shallow, but maybe we aren't tracking this thing where it goes deeper. You know, maybe that gold zone, that quartz, bornite, chalcopyrite stockwork, and, you know, is dipping off in a direction that we haven't tested, and we can track that thing down. So, you know, let's try that. Let's think about that, and let's test it.
So another question is, Tech have rain to request a hole at any time like they did with 2309? Look, 2309, they requested it, but we didn't have to do it. They're, you know, Tech's a shareholder. They don't have a ROFR on the property. They're a shareholder. We like them. They have a lot of knowledge. They have a lot of experience. But I just want to be clear. In terms of exploration geologists, we have the two best in the province, in Charlie and Neil.
Well, that's
And, you know, look, I'm telling you right now.
No, that's Dave and Nick you're talking about.
Dave,
Yeah.
Nick, you know,
We're
and
just the
everyone. But
face.
Tech has great brownfield geologists. They don't have greenfield geologists. They let our guys do, you know, their work. And look, they came in and our stock was at 10 cents. Now it's at 70 cents. So don't fix what's not broken. But in terms of analysis, helping out with some stuff that we don't have the tools for, that's where Tech comes in. And we always like thoughts from, you know, partners like Tech, or even investors like Nate Smith. It takes a village, as I like to say. So if anyone has any comments or suggestions, send them in. We won't necessarily take them. We'll definitely listen to them. Brian H., what sort of specific gravity does a lower sandstone rock sit at? I can't answer that.
it's like 2.65 to 2.7. Like, it's pretty standard silica rich rock. Yeah, in and around that area.
Okay, well, I think that's we have no more questions. If anyone has any last questions, you got a couple seconds to send them in. If not, I appreciate everyone's time. Charlie and Neil, you guys put in a lot of work for this. Thank you. We're going to send out this webinar and a news release tomorrow, so everyone can watch it on recording, send it around. And what else we're going to do? Once the IP is done in a couple weeks, put another news release out. We'll try and explain how we adjusted our plan if we did. If not, pay attention to the story. Look, we've been moving with no news in the last 4 months, and now we're close to drilling. So, as I like to say, you know, hold on to your butts.
Yeah, thanks
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
AE, American Eagle Gold. Thanks, Charlie, Neil, and team.